everyone, and welcome to October 4th Legislative Committee meeting, Town of Vegreville. I'll call this meeting to order at 3:02. First, we'll be looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Thank you, Councillor Bullock. Is there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next up, the adoption of the minutes. Councillor Lemko makes the motion. Is there any errors or omissions within those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, first up, we have no delegations, and we'll go to Director Saskew, Corporate Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. So what I have here is a letter from ATCO from September 8th, 2022. It's addressed to Town of Vegreville, and it is letting us know that we have received a check for $15,557.40, and this represents the available investment of $27.88 per light that has been energized at the Foxview subdivision. So with our LED street conversion and ATCO investment, they will honor any streetlight energizations that we do up until September 21st, 2023. So just letting you all know that we are still receiving investments for any new lights that we install up until the date in September of next year.
All right. Any questions? Everybody's good? Yeah. Thank you very much. Next up is CAO Leggett.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this one's the Council Remuneration Committee memorandum here. So the background is on Thursday, August the 18th this year. Council Remuneration Committee and myself attended a meeting to discuss 3 policies as outlined in the attached minutes. I attended as the recording secretary and would therefore defer to the committee chairperson, Councillor Rudick, for any comment or questions regarding the discussion points leading to the committee recommendations. Financial implications are outlined in the minutes attached to the report, and that administration recommends that council review and discuss the Council Remuneration Committee's recommendations and provide direction to staff on the desired course of action. Included in the staff report are the 3 previous policies for your reference here throughout the discussion.
Okay. Who would like to start us up? Nobody?
You want me to start with an explanation, or?
Yes, as is the chair of the Remuneration Committee, you can tell us what the goals were and how the conversation went.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. So the Remuneration Committee convenes at least once every term, and we've determined that we would like to meet another time in 2 years to determine the payment for council and the number of public members outnumber council members. So it was Councillor Barry and myself and 3 members of the public that comprised this year's version of the committee. And based on some of the recommendations in particular of administration in terms of how to deal with it, as well as taking a look at the standard practice for compensation in other councils, similar communities to our size, trying to determine what was a seamless way to be able to deliver pay to staff, to elected officials in a way that was helpful for staff, as well as also fair to the taxpayers is trying to be the core part of the decision making here. And based on that recommendation and some of the recommendations of our former corporate services director and his experience as the administrator of this file, that this is probably best suited. The previous practice was always based on a per meeting payment, and at various times it's been less or more. But based on how much busier council has become, and that some of the committees are sort of contingent on whoever the chair is, not necessarily based on the council, that it might be best to base council wage as a percentage of what the mayor makes. And that's fairly standard practice. And in general, it's about 65.3% of the mayor's salary is, I think, the standard, or the median average was 64%. So that's kind of where the numbers were determined, and this was recommended Just dividing that between 12 months, this is the amount that the committee came to in terms of suggestion. Then it would be tying the pay to the position, not necessarily to the committees to which they are appointed, because some committees can be meeting once a year, some can be meeting 10 times a month, through no fault of the counselor themselves. What this will mean in the end is there will be a slight increase for some counselors, but in general, it'll be about the same. It will be a marginal shift in terms of how counselors are compensated. The one thing that we don't have as a recommendation here, and maybe we would bring it up here, is to talk about how to compensate deputy mayor, because that will change a little bit. In the past, the deputy mayor would get potentially additional compensation based on the mayor's absence, and so that wouldn't be in place. So there might be additional duties for a deputy mayor that rotates through the rest of the members of council. So that part we might need to discuss here further as a council. The one change under professional development of note is that most people are not using it. So it seems it would be better not to budget for that and rather maybe work backwards to a more nominal amount. So $1,000 per person for professional development, as $3,000 per person was never being utilized. And so taxing or adding that to the tax calculation is probably not a great idea. And if there is truly professional development that needs to occur, that we can decide that as a council. And the travel and expense policy will follow the provincial guidelines, so there's no change there either for the rate. And then to reconvene in 2 years, as I said originally, to discuss and see if, for example, the provincial database compensation for expenses has changed or anything like that. So that would be my summary of our meeting.
Councilor Berry.
Thank you. I'd like to add to that. The recommendations that actually come out of this were stimulated by the public, and I actually took the devil's advocate on this and looked at it from the opposite to everything they were proposing, and their ability to shoot me down was actually very excellent. And one of the aspects is that this does standardize what each councillor is receiving. It also makes and compensates for the extra time in some ways that we all put in outside of committee members or meetings. The aspect as well here is that although when you take a look at the various communities and what other communities were doing and what we were doing ourselves, this is not a lot of a different change. Every councillor will still receive very close to the same average as what we have been getting, but there are benefits to it because it's a more standard administrative, and there's a lot of less administration costs in taking a look at the monthly pay statements from each councillor, and yourself, your worship, going through and ticking off the boxes as, yep, that's a meeting, nope, that's not a meeting, etc., will be reduced because the timesheet now will simply have the honorarium plus any out-of-town meetings, because the out-of-town meetings will still be paid for as in the past. So it does reduce the amount of administrative time in looking at timesheets and getting those all approved and etc. So that was one of the arguments that was definitely a positive for making the change. The aspect, as I said, when we came to our professional development, we had to agree that if we were not actually expending that amount on an across-the-board basis, then we were actually obtaining taxes that weren't being spent. So they were going into reserves very wisely to be brought forward the following year to cover that off. But it's always better to only tax what we really need. So I think that the aspect is if a member of council really wants to take additional courses for the benefit of the community in the long run, that all they need to do is request that and be given approval. And if it's above and beyond $1,000, it's also feasible for somebody who is a counselor who is not using the full amount to transfer that over to somebody who needs a little bit more, so that we balance it out, but we don't overtax. So I think that that was one of the aspects that the public members clearly were expressing. And from the overall, any question I asked, they had an answer for me. So, I think that it was a very good meeting. It was generated primarily through the public, and their homework was very, very adequate to take a look at what other communities were doing similar to our size. So the percentage range, I think, is a wise deal. The only thing that we brought it up and then forgot to clearly discuss it, and that is, in the past, the deputy mayor, if he stepped into a meeting in town even, on your request, would receive an honorarium payment for that. This now really basically means that no matter what we do, we're just covered with the one monthly payment. So we need to take a look at how the deputy mayor position actually should be treated, and what sort of additional, whether it's a percentage increase for those few months that each person sets as a deputy mayor, or on a per meeting basis, I don't know. We'll need to throw that one up in the air. Thank you.
Well, I think we're going into year 5 as me as the mayor, and I think it's happened 3 times where I've asked somebody, so do you really feel that we should be giving a percentage to the deputy mayor or just a per diem if it's happened 3 times in 5 years?
That's partly what I'm saying, is certainly taking over council is very rare, because your worship, you're basically here 100%, we'll say 99% of the time. So that isn't the area.
I myself personally,
for most of it.
Before we go much further into that, I just think that if the deputy mayor needs to run a meeting, that then there can be a per diem presented there, instead of like adding to the deputy mayor. So everybody gets the deputy mayor twice in a term.
Yep.
For 6 months, and then they get a boost for doing, really, I mean, but if there's a per diem, an allowance for $100 to run a meeting, that if the mayor was not there, I think that would be fair compensation, instead of a percentage to move forward just because you're deputy mayor and without being asked to any meetings.
I'm just, part of it is respecting what the role of the deputy mayor is, so that we actually understand that, your worship, if you are not available, then is the deputy mayor expected to take that stead and have that responsibility. So I guess that's the aspect of making sure that we do understand what the role of the deputy mayor is.
Certainly. Councillor Lemko, did you have a comment?
Looking this over, certainly I have comments regarding the increase. I think we're well compensated. I would be happy with staying status quo, but that's not what this committee has brought forward. As for the role of deputy mayor, I believe it's part and parcel of the role as a councillor to step into the deputy mayor's role from time to time and assume that. And should this number go forward, I think we're well compensated to step into that role for the short period of time. I don't believe a per diem to take the chair is necessary, and I think we're well compensated for what we do.
Councillor Warwa?
Yeah, I think I would echo what Councillor Lemko said, in the fact of, for the rare times that it happens and we all try to step in and cover each other, I don't know that we need to allot anything additional. And if there was an extreme situation with the mayor where he was gone for a really long extended time period, then that might be a discussion of council as to whether that salary could shift. But at this point, I don't think we have to specifically set it. Again, I'm happy to either accept or not accept the recommendation. I know that's why we go to an independent. I do think one of the things that I like is the fact that I know myself sometimes I'm feeling unsure as to whether or not something should or shouldn't be charged in a meeting. And sometimes I find myself asking other people, well, are you or aren't you? And then I don't know what to do. And I do think that it doesn't happen often, but sometimes we are given a presentation that becomes a separate meeting prior to our meetings. And I would be more comfortable not actually having those paid as an additional meeting, just for that stance, because sometimes it's just an hour or something before, but it is a separate meeting. So I think having a standard would be easier and it'd probably be easier administrative.
Go ahead, Councillor Bullock.
I think I can echo what Councillor Lemko has said about the recommendation of not having a per diem for becoming deputy mayor. A lot of us are used to volunteering anyway, so I don't think it's a big problem just to step in and do that for the additional time that it takes. So I could support the recommendation going forward. I like what was done with the professional development, because yeah, if you're not going to be using it, no sense taxing people going ahead with that anyways. And if we'll share amongst each other if we really need it anyway. So we're only going to be taking things relevant to what we need. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what I think. I think that council on this town of Vegreville, councillors have been underpaid for a long time. This basically $3,100 a month, whatever it breaks down to here. The way it's set up right now, that councillor has to work a lot to get that kind of money, got to attend a lot of meetings. So I am quite happy that the councillors are going to get recognized, as I know what other councillors make in counties and other towns, and we don't compensate for the amount of time enough. So I'm very happy with this recommendation. The fact that I don't have to sit down and go through everybody's timesheet every month and determine if they should have went to that meeting, this will work a lot better for in-town meetings. Everybody understands if you're taking a Zoom meeting or Teams meeting, or if you're attending a virtual conference from home, you're not getting paid as part of your per diem. Okay. On the professional development side, I know in the last few years not a lot of people have used their personal development, but there's lots of boards that you set on that have conferences and travel, and so it will get used up in a hurry, because the only conferences that are covered in here are AU, Alberta Munis, AM, and it stayed the same on FCM, that during one term every councillor gets to go once, paid for. So if you're on economic development and FCSS, to go to 2 conferences during the year, your $1,000 would be shot in a hurry with your registration, your hotels, and your mileage. I do have a problem when it comes to municipal education, because there's enough courses out there that we could have somebody become a professional student, and all they have to do is ask. So I'm not sure how we would police that. I mean, if it's going to be left up to me, I would hold everybody to their $1,000. So, Councillor Rudick?
If I could just clarify, I think maybe the application of professional development has maybe been interpreted a little bit differently than what the actual letter of the definition is. So this is, professional development is intended for courses and education and conferences that are relevant to being a counselor, separate from being a council member on a committee. So FCSS and economic development would be outside of that. So those would be part and parcel. Presumably, all of us would be attending something that would be relevant to the committees that were appointed. And professional development is actually supposed to be for just that, the developing of your personal and your professional skills in the course of being a better counselor and a better adjudicator of the funds and the responsibilities that we have of governors of the community. So even the definition here is a little bit different. So it does have specifically laid out here, as you referenced, FCM and Alberta Munis. We need to change that, actually. 3.6.1, I just caught that, thank you. But it is different than the examples of going to conferences that are relevant or related to the committees upon which we sit. So maybe we do need to have that spelled out here in the policy a little bit more, or in the compensation, because that is different than professional development. And I do appreciate the fact that your worship is very sharp with the pencil. And I think we're all familiar with that, so that part is absolutely fine and understandable, but maybe we need to flesh out that definition a little bit further, because this professional development is a little bit different than what you've just discussed. It's a little bit different.
And I know for a fact when we brought this professional development in, and it was including conferences, because we were having, at the time, some counselors that were taking every course available out there and going to everything that moved, it was on their, within their board or not. And it was getting way out of hand. So we brought it in that $3,000 was your expense for the year. Personal development, conferences, other than those two. And it ended up with COVID, there wasn't a lot of conferences happening. There wasn't a lot of people that were taking courses other than on Zoom meetings. So I'm not going to be in favor of this until we figure this out, because there's still a lot of conferences that people can go to. And I really don't feel that we should just leave an open-ended to counselor to decide how many conferences they're going to go to in a year, other than the two that we've identified here already. So go ahead, Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't believe that was the intent of the committee. The committee said that you'd have $1,000 that would be towards actual personal development, or professional development, I should say. But if you wanted to go to other things, you would have to request permission through council. So if I was wanting to go to a conference, I'll take ASHA, for example. I used to sit on the board, and I'd go to ASHA, and it's probably not a good one as an example, but a conference that is outside, Northern Lights Conference, we'll say, or a libraries conference. I'm not sitting on the library board, I'm not sitting on, but if I was interested in it, I would have to have permission before I could go to that conference. I couldn't just decide myself that I could go to it. So the aspect is that, yes, if it's a conference that's directly one of my committees, I may have permission and use my $1,000. But that's still not really what professional development is. Professional development would maybe be anger management. I'm joking. Maybe I am. Anyway, what I'm getting at is, it's a course that would make me better as a counselor and serve the town better. But a conference is one that if it's outside of what really I'm sitting on as committees, then I would need to have permission. And if it was deemed that it was permissible, then I could go to it. But I would not be able to decide on myself, by myself, as to what conferences I'd be going to outside of something that is directly related to one of my committees. I think that's what we were actually intending to go on it. So what we're looking at is the $1,000 would probably suffice on true professional development, but it wouldn't be limited, because you could get permission to go to something that might be worthwhile for you to attend. So I think that's the aspect. But the $3,000, if everybody was only spending half of that, we're taking it in taxes every year, and that's inappropriate. So we shouldn't be taxing something, overtaxing something, and then putting it into reserve. I think that was what was coming from the committee.
Yeah, well,
Anyway,
and we're still missing the point here, because I don't want it coming down to the fact that if there isn't a budget, each counselor has, and we called it personal development. I've used the PD sign on people's timesheets for a lot of stuff I figured they shouldn't be at that meeting. It had nothing to do with what their job role is at that given year on council. But they chose to go. So I put it down as PD. So if we're gonna leave it up to just council making a decision before someone goes, when they get back?
Before.
Yeah, and you sat on a council where there was a group that sort of monopolized whatever they wanted to do, and the rest of council, didn't matter what they thought, it just went through. So, I myself personally, I like a personal budget, and I know we called it personal development, but we all knew what was captured in personal development. You went over 3,000 in meetings that you decided you wanted to go to that had no relevance to your board, or you wanted to go to conferences, it was all captured in that. So all I'm saying is we need to find some way to do that. Go ahead, Councilor Curtis.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I agree to keep everybody honest and true and have it laid out line by line. The other reservation I kind of have is the blanket pay. For me, if Councilor Barry attends 12 more meetings in a year or a term than I do, then I feel that person should be compensated for going to those meetings. That's a thought I have on that. And that's really all. It's a good conversation here. It's a good debate. That's one of the things that I see in keeping people true. I mean, it may be very easy to not make a meeting now when there's no real repercussions for not going to it.
That is another concern too. If I start to see the meetings falling off, that people aren't attending meetings, I mean, again, I don't think that we're gonna have a big problem. Because as we reorg every year and your role changes on different boards, you'll know, I mean, I can look at anybody's timesheet and know that what board they're setting on, because they'll have 6 more meetings within a month than somebody else. But as the board changes every year that you're set on, it sort of works itself out. The problem I have sometimes when there's freelancing, just going to whatever meetings that they can find. Because between Alberta, the Economic Alberta platform, Alberta Chamber, and things that are happening now that COVID's over, somebody could have 20 out-of-town meetings on their own. So how do we police that? And that's what I'm very happy that council will get paid what I feel is a good size raise, and they deserve it compared to what we got paid and what other counties and other municipalities make. I'm okay with this. I'm just not okay with not having control other than one counselor phones 3 other counselors. I really want to go to this. Will you back me up? Because next time I'll back you up. And that's the problem that I have with the way it is open-ended like this. But Councilor Rudick's next.
Sorry, so can I make a suggestion? I'm just going to answer Councillor Curtis's concern that is always the argument the other way, that councillors should be paid for what they do. But I would say that it is a truism regardless of where you work, whether it's in public office or a private business. There's no guarantee that 2 people that are doing exactly the same job are expending the same energy. And in this instance, there's absolutely no control that we have to be able to determine, for example, if Councillor Barry is on a committee that has been dismissed for 6 months. And so, in essence, he's done all the preparation for a meeting that never happens, and so he doesn't get compensated, whereas I could be attending a meeting that happens every month, and we basically do nothing, and I get compensated for that. So it's basically to level the playing field, and there isn't a history on this council of people not being diligent. If that changes in the future, we may have to have a different discussion. But I will say that this compensation is still not very much relative to how other councils are compensated. So this is, I think, a fair level, and tying it to the mayor's wage seemed to be something that was a little bit more justifiable or relatable, so that there could be something to demonstrate. So it's not just a number out of the sky. And the other thing is that professional development, perhaps what we need to do is put a definition of professional development in there, so that professional development policy is for that. We don't have that definition in there right now, so maybe that's something that we could add, which would help clarify what it is exactly encompassing, because of course there is a historical relationship there of what the intention of that policy was intended to do, but there have only been 2 people that have used the entire amount since this policy was enacted in 2018. So it's never been used.
No, because it worked. That's what happened. Nobody got on a committee, put their hand up to be on the subcommittee, became the chair of a subcommittee, and then ended up having extra 8 meetings a month because the policy worked. That's why
Well,
we need to, I don't care how we write it.
yeah, and I think maybe, and I'm not discounting your worship's concern, because I recall that very well. And none of present company here would be what you're referring to, of course, because this is a council that takes their work diligently. But perhaps a definition of professional development would help. And in addition to that, maybe we need to come up with a sort of a sub-list, and that would be maybe a procedure rather than a policy, just to talk about which conferences might potentially be coming up on a particular board. And I mean, I can't imagine, I don't know what is on VTSS, but I can imagine FCSS has the FCSS AA. But maybe we can have a little bit of a conversation that would be separate from this policy per se, to talk about what might be encompassed in those committees. Because of course, when we do our organizational meetings, part of the consideration in the past has been balancing the workload between the group assembled here. So we can actually add that to the list of information that we're providing with each of the committees and the boards, so that we have an idea of what we're tasking with various council members as well. And I will tag back to this phrase, we're not volunteers, and it's important to remember that we're not volunteers. There are many things that we do that are volunteer, but if we expect a professional level of decorum and work ethic and output from this council, we are professionals, and that means that we're working for the pay that we receive. And I would say that we work hard, and that doesn't mean that we need to be overcompensated, and for that reason, I think this is what the committee put forward. So if I can make a suggestion that we have a definition of professional development, maybe we can come up with that. CAO Leggett and Councillor Berry, we can circulate with our public members and bring that back to council. And at our organizational meeting, which will be happening very soon, have a compiled list of potential conferences, if I can ask each of the council members here to maybe delineate which that would be for each of their committees, if that would be acceptable.
Okay, Councillor Warwick.
I'm just wondering, for the sake of simplicity, I understand the reasons behind. I actually think it is very good to have a little bit where it's not a I'll call you kind of decision. And I'm wondering if just a simple adjustment might alleviate the problem. It already says within there we can work together within each other's boards, but maybe rather than, we know that no one's used the 3,000, but maybe rather than going to 1,000, would it simplify it if it just went to $2,000? It would bring it down. It would still allow us to share amongst ourselves and bring it to a closer level. And then it's something that, again, we could review to see whether that worked better. But it would already be a significant reduction in what we currently set aside. And it still allows us to work together to figure those out, but kind of stops the review of the board and individual requests. I'm just wondering if maybe that would be a simplistic way to show we're doing our due diligence and reducing as much as possible, but keeping it at an easier rate.
Well, that's the only problem that I'm having is with this. Again, I'm glad that councillors are going to get paid. Before, it was almost embarrassing what councillors get paid here. I mean, we voted down a raise one time, the remuneration committee brought back, but listening to other councils, and I know how much work everybody puts in here now, so, and I think it's fair, and then we don't have to go through all the in-town meetings. Believe me, if I notice that your board meetings and stuff are starting to drop off, or if I hear conversation that the councilor's not showing up, I will hold you to task on that. I mean, because it's a very important role. It's the other things that are out there and the possibilities, because that's left to me to deal with. So it worked before, and if we can find some way of arranging, I mean, collecting an extra few $1,000s, I mean, I don't think we've ever spent our whole budget for the councilor's budget. So, I don't know, if the committee wants to bring something back, but I like to have some checks and balances in there, because there's just too many other meetings and too many other conferences that people could attend, and it'll just become a problem, so. And I'm not saying that anybody here is doing anything wrong, but when you determine on your own, and when you want to be on an executive of a subcommittee, and I know you're supposed to come back and ask council that, but then usually it's how many meetings? Oh, I don't know. But, you know, Because there won't be a problem joining a subcommittee in town. We'll all be out of town. And I just like to have a checks and balance because it just made sense and it worked before and nobody went over that budget. So, other than that, I'm okay with everything else that's in here, so.
Okay, so we've got two proposals. Would it help alleviate the concern if we have a definition of professional development in the policy? I think that probably isn't a bad thing to have in there, so that it's very clear what professional development is. And then also get council to maybe list out the conferences and outside meetings that they might possibly attend in the course of doing their duties on their boards and committees, that could be added specifically under the definitions, because as it stands right now, it says other conferences, workshops, seminars, webinars, and educational opportunities relevant to professional development related to town business in the capacity as an elected official. So this fits to the definition that both Councillor Barry and myself and the committee understood, which is potentially a little different in the application that has been utilized in the past. So is that helpful, or should we go with Councillor Warwa's suggestion that instead of 1,000 per councillor, that we go to 2,000 per councillor? Because I wouldn't likely reconvene that group, but we could email them and just ask for their input, see if they're comfortable with that suggestion. Because ultimately, council is the one that would be making the decision on their recommendation.
Any thoughts? You guys want to put a definition, list all the different conferences that you may or may not go to? I mean, personal development was what we called it before, but it captured a very large net of things that could happen. Because if not, then it'll just come down to me making the decision on payday. And I don't like that. I mean, to come here and plead your case to council before you go someplace this is worthy of the citizens, the taxpayers of this community are going to appreciate me being at this conference. I don't know. Go ahead, CEO.
May I make a suggestion, Your Worship? In the past, what I've seen done with this item is that in the case of something special, like a conference or an educational item, the council member would come back to council and essentially make a business case for that particular conference, similar to what staff would do for me for a given educational course or something they wanted to take, right? So to that end, it's not yourself making the decision sort of unilaterally. The case is presented to the council members. I feel I should go to this particular conference at this cost for these reasons. Here's how I feel it'll benefit the community. Do I have the support of the members of council, yay or nay? And then it's a group decision at that point. Keeps it all transparent, make sure that it's not up to one person, and seem to work well. Just a thought.
I think that would work terrible. I really do. Because you're not standing out here in front of all the taxpayers in town. They're in your office. So I really think that we should have a budget. And if you get past that budget, you're done. And it's worked in the past. And I don't want people freelancing because I've seen it. And it causes problems within council. So go ahead, Councillor Orla.
Yeah, I would agree with you on the budget, and it still unfortunately would allow the same issue where councillors could be perceived to have spoken to each other for coverage. So I like the idea of a budget. The only thing I was just going to make a comment was to Councillor Rudick's when we were mentioning about listing. I think the definition you have though is very encompassing. Like it does allow for those items that are related. So, and it might be a little bit hard to provide a list because sometimes things come up as different programs or initiatives come up. So I think you guys have a good definition, and it's pretty encompassing.
Councillor Curtis.
Thank you. Well, in that case, I think that Councillor Warwa's idea is good. Knock it down $1,000 this year to 2. If we don't use it, it goes back in. And in 2 years, you look at it. If nobody's still using it, knock it down another 1,000.
Okay, well, it's up to council. You got 2 there, Councillor Bullock.
I'll go along with that recommendation with Counselor Curtis and Counselor Warren. Go with that and see how it works.
Committee member, Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Worship. Much of all this discussion was my devil's advocate on a lot of things too. On this, I think the important thing in my perspective is to continue to call it as we called it when we developed the policy, and that's professional development. I don't think any counselor should be working on a personal development. It should be professional. It should be directly related to our ability to perform as a counselor. So I could go with the aspect of 2,000 and see where it goes from there. I think that the only reason this was brought up predominantly was that there is each year that this has been in place, it was being pointed out to us that there is an excess of what our budget was, and it was going into reserves, but wisely being brought back to try and compensate this to avoid double taxing or triple taxing on this one budget item. So I think from that perspective, I think that we could give it a try at changing it to 2,000 and seeing where it goes, and all be respectful of the aspect that we're trying to do it as a professional development, not personal.
Okay. Where are you at, Councillor Lemko?
I'd be happy to see it as it's presented to us, $1,000, and then increase it if it's necessary versus decrease it. I think we need to. It's not being used, not being utilized. And this discussion in this room already tells us that we're accountable for that professional development. If you exceed that outside the line, you'll be held accountable by this council. That's my opinion.
Okay, Councillor Wood.
So I would differ a little bit than some of my council mates. Professional development is for furthering your professional skills in the course of being a counselor, which is separate. And actually just going through my written notes from the meeting that day too, is that the whole intention of streamlining the policies, and there's 3 different ones here, is to remove the workload for our administrative staff as well as for the mayor. And part of that is the only thing that you would be reviewing then is the expense claims. So perhaps that's where the expense definition needs to be added to, rather than professional development. I think the $1,000 per person for professional development could be anything from effective chairing to learning more about affordable housing, to be on the Minburn Foundation, or how to support diverse groups for FCSS, whatever the course might be, would be separate, and that would be adjudicated just within that budget, and the expenses might be separate from that as in the course of doing your committee or board work, so that your expenses are separate from professional development, because I think they're getting blurred. I don't have a problem with being accountable. We're all accountable for what we do with the public money, and I think we take that duty very seriously, but maybe that's where we should be adding it to, because there is another policy, that's the travel and expense. Maybe that's where it should be added to.
Okay, well, whatever. I'm not on the committee. Like, all I'm saying is it worked in the past. I don't want to sit here and at every meeting having somebody pitch their case to go to a conference, or somebody pitch their case that there's this other meeting, you know, and I think it'd be important. I'd like to join this other group, and, you know, because we've seen that in the past where the boards that the town supports have grown. And we scaled them back to the ones that are town boards, because there was a time where people decided they were going to set on boards on their own, and they brought it back to council and it was approved. So I don't want to be sitting here every meeting or listening about, there's this one thing I want to do. I want to go there, and we all debate it. So you can call personal development educational courses that are offered through municipal affairs or through Alberta Munis. You can call it whatever you want, but I would still want a budget for the, if you want to put 1,000 into the training and 1,000 into conferences or things on the side that you would think that is important to you to go to, I'm okay with that. I don't care what you call it. But I don't want to sit here every meeting and start determining between councillors how important it is that somebody goes to this conference, which they really, it's not a board of theirs, but it may be down the road. So it's worked in the past, and I know that the last couple of years, there haven't been conferences. So again, so these personal development dollars, we'll call it personal development, but in actual fact, it was a budget for your own use and what you decided how you were going to use it in the year, without coming to council, explaining and asking for everybody's acceptance because this, you feel it's worthwhile to go to. And so we were all in the same boat that way. So I propose then that we have a personal development for 1,000 and an expense claim of 1,000 and use it where you want. And when it's gone, it's gone. And that's, for anything, another meeting that's not a board you're on, you decide to go see something else, then that comes off of your personal development. So we're not here sitting here explaining it to each other and asking for everybody's to, you know, vote in favor of this. I really feel like it's something I should do. Go ahead, Councilor Rudick.
Okay, so I'm just taking a look at the policy here and just trying to figure out where we would put that into the expenses and travel and expense policy. So as it stands right now, there is no maximum. So this would be an additional line item. So for example, if a counselor was driving to meetings out of town, that there could be it wouldn't be, it's not inconceivable that you could use up that entire $1,000 in the course of a year for mileage, potentially, if you've got, most of us don't have out of town, but if we're attending a conference and driving separately, and we're always very judicious about trying to carpool together. But are you suggesting that $1,000 addition or limit on the travel expense claim be added as a different definition in that one then? And $1,000 for professional development would stay where it is? Because that could be put under some of the definitions here, and we could bring that back. Is that what your suggestion?
That's where I was going, because
Okay.
we added at 2,000 acceptable on council here. You brought up the fact, let's break it down, personal development and something else. So
I'll just, maybe under travel reimbursements, if we can just maybe take a look at that and see if that addition there would make a difference. It's 2.0 on the travel and expense policy area, and see if there's maybe a maximum that needs to be put in there, which is separate from professional development. And then that will alleviate some of your concerns that there is no ability for counselors to be freelancing, as you use the term, as well as making sure that it's seamless for staff and for council as well. So we're not coming back perpetually to approve the attendance at something that is part of the expectation of being a board member on specific committees on behalf of council.
well, let's say you're on the Economic Development Board, and they meet in Banff twice, I'm pretty sure a year, a conference twice a year there in Banff. Once. So what is the registration, what is the rooms, what is the travel? That $1,000 is gone, and that's why we have reorg meetings, so that we can share the boards around, and everybody gets a little knowledge of everything that's going on. So would $1,000 in expenses cover that one conference? Barely.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying. That's why I'm saying, does it need to be an additional cap? So I think maybe what you've expressed is the concern that we haven't answered in this policy, is that there still needs to be another area to be able to limit.
So would you expect that if somebody's on economic development to go to the AGM as well and spend a couple nights in a hotel at the AGM and then go to their quarterly meetings of the Alberta Economic Developers too? Really, because where's the checks? Where does it stop? And that's the thing. It worked in the past. I just don't see why we just don't leave it there. I mean, collecting a few extra tax dollars and it gets turned back in the other way. It worked, and we didn't have to sit here and go through every meeting about who wanted to do what. Go ahead.
Yeah, you made a very valid point a moment ago when you said we had to take into consideration the fact that, in the past 2 years, there hasn't been some of these conferences. Maybe it's reasonable to say, like, I like the idea of just having a set number. People can always share it around like we had done before, and it just stops this debate about breaking it up and how many. I do think there needs to be a cap. I would be comfortable it being reduced or being left at the 3,000, but maybe given the fact that it is new and we need to reevaluate now that things are opening up again where it sits, maybe it is reasonable to just leave it as it is. I could support that.
Well, at 2,000, so maybe you're on economic development or your FCSS conference or whatever board you're on, your ASHA. I'm not sure, but you will understand that the next year you're not on that board. Maybe you will take a couple of courses that year, that are relevant to your job as a counselor. But when you have a budget that you're living in, trying to fit what you think you can do in a year, as far as personal development, attend conferences, network with other people that are on those identical boards and stuff, and have government officials there, you have to make decisions on your own to stay within your budget. And you don't have to come back to council and ask for permission. And I can tell you that I'm pretty good at knowing what everybody's meeting should be. So I have no problem writing down PD where I think it should be. So we all agree, let's say $2,000. And I don't care if you want to call it personal development or if you want to call it expense. You can put it anywhere you want, but let's all live within the same rules.
Okay. I guess maybe then we need to change the name of it because it's not professional development. So it would be course attendance or council professional development doesn't seem to capture what we're talking about here, and I have no problem with what you're suggesting at all. I think each of us needs to be accountable for the money that we're expending and remember where it comes from. So the derivation of that is completely understandable. This is and was named the Council Professional Development, so that is the former policy that was circulated to each of you in your council agenda package. So maybe what we need to do is change the name of that policy, and that'll answer that concern. And $2,000 instead of $3,000 is already a reduction, and see where it lands. I'm comfortable with that too. I guess ideologically, I think professional development is not what we're necessarily doing here. And I understand that I don't think that we should be coming back and discussing this because I don't think it's right for example, if somebody doesn't believe in attending conferences, and we've had this in the past too, where people believe that they're saving the taxpayers by not getting the ability to be able to network with other communities, and we're not actually doing the collaboration and regional development that we actually need. That shouldn't hold anybody else back from being able to pursue that because it is actually in the best interest of the community. So maybe that's the sweet spot.
Some of it is.
Some of it, for sure.
And we brought this policy in to eliminate the stuff that wasn't, or at least trying to hold people under $3,000. Go ahead, Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just add that, yes, we brought this in because of activities 8 years ago, 7 years ago, et cetera. And we wanted to try and make this a little bit more as to what's going on. I'll use myself as a bit of an example here right now, though. I had been on a number of different boards, so yes, I was involved in trying to learn more about seniors housing, affordable housing, et cetera, over the time period. And I was connected with libraries, so I was trying to learn more about libraries and how library systems. I'm no longer on those boards. So now I sit on one or two that are connected with community health and doctors' retentions and all that sort of thing. And I'm at a bit of a loss on that. So now I need to be going to conferences, et cetera, that are related to that in order that I can bring myself up to speed with what is taking place in the area. And a couple of the meetings, including one this morning, are right along that line. of attending. The unfortunate thing is, this year, each time that they scheduled one of the RAP conferences or et cetera, we were in meetings here. So I couldn't even ask or decide to go to them because I'm committed to a council meeting. But that is where we change. When we change roles, suddenly the expertise that we had been gathering over 2 or 3 years is set aside, and we have to take up a whole new role, and we need to be able to go to conferences or courses that will bring us up to speed on that. I'm still sitting on these meetings in health and taking a look at the letters that they use and trying to figure out what they mean. You know, because they use these acronyms and they throw them out because they're all professionals in the area, and I'm going, whoops, missed that one. And so I'm asking a lot of questions. So I think that's where the development really is professional, in essence, is trying to bring yourself up to speed when you're all of a sudden set on different boards that have a lot of different, a different slant, if you want to say, to your own personal background or your previous experiences. So I think that's where it's important for us to be able to go to these. But, so I'm saying it has been working, but maybe we're just asking for too much in terms of budget. Thank you.
Okay, so call it what you will. Have a rewrite it. I don't care. It's a budget of some type per member of $2,000. Go ahead.
Councillor Councillor Leggett. You'll get a really big pay cut. How about I'll work with CEO Leggett to work out some of those details so that we can bring that forward to the next council meeting. Does that work?
Thank you, Councillor. And I was just about to bring up, I'm sort of tracking 5 distinct discussion items here. So yeah, maybe if you and I can connect over the next week or so, we'll get that sorted out. Yeah, okay, thanks.
All in all, I agree with what they're saying here. I think it's about time. And again, hopefully, you know, I know this council, everybody here is committed to what we're doing. And if somebody has to miss a meeting, they will phone their alternate or see who they can get in to cover for that spot. And, you know. Okay. Any other comments need to be made on this? Because it'll come back at a council meeting and you'll get your chance to vote on it to the public. I mean, there is raises in here, and sometimes that's hard for people to understand, but if they knew what other councillors were making and if they knew exactly how much each councillor here makes, I would imagine they would be in favor of this too. So we had members of the general public that, you know, took a look at what other municipalities pay, and I still think we're a little shy, but it's good. Okay, thank you. So do we think we'll see this at the next council meeting? We got till the end of the year to get this done anyway, right?
Yeah, I'll work with Councillor Rudick here and we'll try and get it back to you as soon as we can.
Or Councillor Barry? She's busy. Okay, thank you. Next up, we have correspondence from Gloria Kinderbrink. Is that how you say your last name? Yeah? Krenbrick? Disappointing visit to Vegreville. For the past 40-some years, my family has been stopping at the Vegreville's lovely Pasenka Park on our way home to Edmonton from Saskatchewan. It offers a lovely break from the drive and a chance to stretch one's legs, use the washroom, and purchase a snack and gas in town. On Sunday, August the 28th, 2022, at approximately 7:40 p.m., we pulled off the highway into the town and into the park. To our dismay, the washrooms were locked. The first time we have experienced this in our many years of travel. We felt unwelcome in Vegreville, and it is unlikely that we'll be stopping next time. Vegreville has a fabulous tourist attraction with the unique Pasenka Park, which I noted has been further developed in the past few years. However, if tourists are not able to access necessary facilities, the experience is ruined. As I have no idea who is responsible for the decisions to lock the washrooms, I am sending you this letter in hopes that you will forward my concerns as appropriate. Well, what time do we usually close the Vic down at night? Go ahead, Jameson. Oh.
No, I was just gonna defer actually over to you, so yeah.
Well, I can speak to this because I did see this coming in the agenda, so I conferred with our manager of, or our coordinator, beg your pardon, of tourism and culture. And just as a backstory, there are essentially two separate waves of operating hours at the Pacifica. One that would allow us to have longer hours because we have college students that are manning it, and the second wave is shorter hours of operation because those college students have gone home or gone back to school. So as of the 28th, we had switched over, unfortunately, just so happened to be on that day, switched over to fall hours, which were 9 to 5 across the board. And that's been common for the last several years. In fact, according to our tourism and culture coordinator, after 2019, there was a study done of sales generated during the hours of 8 to 8, where it was open at one time, 7 days a week during that span throughout the summer and even into the early fall. But it was determined that based on those sales, it just wasn't warranted. So we closed on the Sunday in question at 5 p.m. as we had just switched over to those fall hours because those college students had gone home. It's unfortunate, but there are also two, I won't call them outhouses, but there are two permanent fixture washrooms there out aside from the ones that are accessed through the Vic. So it's an unfortunate letter, but it just happened to be bad timing for this guest. And if she would have taken a bit of a drive or a walk, she easily would have found two facilities that are regularly cleaned and maintained.
Okay, so I'm passing this on to the tourism department, and the tourism can get back to this traveler and let them know the reasons why. I know that to staff these parks and stuff, especially after our college and high school students have gone home, gone back to school and stuff, it's, you know, for that's getting late in the year like that. But just explain what the situation was, and that's what we can do. I mean.
Noted. We'll make sure she gets a response.
Okay, Councillor Warwell?
I'm just wondering if one thing that we could do, and I understand we absolutely do have the other washroom facilities available. I'm just wondering if maybe what we could also do is add a sign that said outside of operating hours, bathroom facilities are, you know, located on, and just a secondary. And then if we do decide to do that, that could be something that we thank her for bringing it to our attention, giving her that explanation, and let her know that we'll now be providing signage to properly direct somebody. I don't know if that might just be a way to alleviate slightly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that Annie and I will discuss, and I don't see why we couldn't have some signage posted there.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Bullock.
Actually, I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think there is signage on the door directing them to the other washrooms. Oh. I do believe so.
I'm not entirely sure. I know I have visited the park myself, and I had seen signage. Was it posted that specific day? No, which is why I said maybe we'll talk with Annie just to confirm. But, you know, obviously, if there aren't staff there, we don't want them accessing the washrooms where vandalism could occur and cause a significant amount of money, right? So there are facilities there, and I believe there is a sign, but I'll make sure that that was indeed the case. And if it wasn't, it's something that we'll look at. But either way, this visitor will get a response, and hopefully we can mend some fences and repair some bridges.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up, we got the round table discussion. So I think we're gonna start, who went last time? Councillor Bullock, what have you been hearing?
Well, personally, aside from around the corn maze, because that's where I've been spending a lot of my time, I haven't heard much of anything else within the community. I did see a lot of action on the Vegreville Junior B Rangers and stuff going on out there. Some good feedback about them playing and stuff like that. So it was good to see some excitement that way in the hockey field, like there usually isn't enough anyways. But just let's throw a little more on top.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Curtis.
Thank you. Same thing for me. I was able to take in the corn maze, and we did some volunteering out there, the family, so it was nice, and everybody's really talking it up, and it's a great thing, and all the different people from all over the place that were there, so it's far and wide reaching. As well with the hockey side too, I was asked to drop the ceremonial puck for the first Junior B game, which was very nice, as I played on the Junior Bs before, so nice to get out and see some of the new younger kids on there and see some of the executive that were around when I was playing and stuff like that too, and Pete, who's still there for 40-something years as equipment manager, so that's all I got.
Councillor Lemko.
Thanks, Your Worship. I fortunately was asked to drop the puck at the Vipers game. And no, I didn't play with them before. And I had a hard time getting from the box to the center ice because it's a slippery ice surface. Anyway, it was a good crowd, and it was nice to see the home opener. I believe they won the game against Barhead. So moving on, what I'm hearing on the streets, just people are inquisitive about the Prosperity Park and the status of the park, asking questions, and we keep reminding them that it's still being worked on. The ground's being leveled and infrastructure is going in. So at such time once that's done, we'd probably be better in a position to inform the public as to where we stand. Interesting, Foxview is getting a lot of traffic out there from people driving around and seeing the builds, the 4 houses that are building out there, and it's interesting to watch the growth of that park. And also, I'm encouraged by the amount of work that's being done by Parks and Facilities and Public Works, infrastructure, and all that in the community, and how clean and pristine it's looking. So kudos to our staff who are working and using this beautiful weather to get us ready for what's coming forward. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, outside of being at the corn maze and talking with a lot of individuals that are coming from out of town, and very pleased with not just the facility out there, but around town, and noting in the evenings when I've gone out for supper that I'm actually seeing some of the ones that were at the corn maze stopping for supper in town. So I know that it's bringing people into town. And all the comments are quite positive, so I'm glad to see that. And I think that our local people started coming out this Sunday. I started seeing more familiar faces, so I'm hoping that the next 2 weekends, the weather is still looking good. So we're hoping that we can pull it off and have 6 consecutive nice weather weekends. Thank you.
You can guarantee that?
Sure.
Councillor Warren.
I just got a couple things. So one was I'm hearing lots of buzz about people being happy to see events coming. A couple people had sort of expressed to me that they were a little bit sad that for Halloween we wouldn't have our haunted hike. So I'd just like to mention, I think once again, that is still an opportunity. I realize this year it is an opportunity, but I think it's certainly an opportunity in the future. Glad to see that there is, I know there's a Junior B dance for the Halloween, and so it's just nice to see some activity, but I've also heard this want and almost like yearning for these activities to restart. So I think any Christmas events that could be up and coming will be really well attended. So I think that's really good. The one thing that I wanted to bring forward is I had reported in my last report about going to the value scoping meeting, and I was appreciative to be included in that. I just want to mention to the councillors that maybe we can start to think about this. I feel like something came from it that's been sticking with me, and that it's maybe a warrant for a discussion in regards to numbers and projections and what we think is coming in town or what's existing in town. So I just kind of want to throw that out there. I had asked a question that I found a little bit disturbing of the group, and the question that I asked was, when we throw around words like buildings and utilization, is that number that you're used or that formula that you use, is it taking into consideration rural versus urban, or is it standard across the province? And the answer I got was it was standard across the province. And to me, that doesn't make sense when we are talking about a city. You could have one apartment building that could have 50 kids in it, but when you're in a rural community and you look at farms, you know there's no possibility in the distance between. So that kind of brought that to me, that if across the province, when people are looking at buildings and utilizations and stuff, if they're using things that are standard and they're not looking at it on a rural versus urban, that maybe that formula is wrong. So that kind of stood with me. Also, if what we're hearing is that utilization of spot is this strict formula and it's not taking into consideration outside factors, I think that's kind of an issue that's bugging me. So when I know personally that other communities are having these conversations in slightly other forms, but conversations, and it could impact those other communities' schools, those communities, some of their kids are already coming to us. So I think that no decision can be looked at just on one little basis. It really has to, we have to be able to advocate for them to look at the whole picture. What other conversations are happening? Looking at the fact that we can say things like provincially there's areas with outgrowth. Well, provincially there's areas that actually were reduced in population. I think the fact that Vegreville, never mind our potential growth that I believe is coming, I think just the very fact that we've been able to maintain at a time when many have lost says something about the community. So in my mind, what I got from that is that I think that there maybe needs to be a discussion, and our role as a council might be for some advocacy, maybe even an outreach or a letter to the minister to talk about when these discussions happen, are these formulas that are being used just a standard formula, which is what I understand. So I just want to throw that out there. I will email all council just a little bit of the overview of the second day that we were there, just so that everybody knows what happened there. But it just does disturb me that I still feel there's a missing piece across so many things in the province where we're not understanding that we can't have one formula to do rural and urban. So just a couple points I want to bring forward.
And when's the next meeting or the next information session supposed to take place there?
So we didn't have I wasn't given a specific date at that point. We were just told that they were kind of taking, because some recommendations and stuff had come forward, and they were going to kind of take that and then let people know, kind of next step. It was more supposed to be just some information gathering, but I know that there's conversations in other communities, and I think that when somebody tells us what our community looks like or what our projections are, if we don't think that they're in line, we need to push back a little bit on it, and I didn't feel what I was hearing was necessarily a true representation.
Who else attended these? So if you could get together, you three, and get a list of questions, and we'll write the school board and ask for some answers. So we're just not gonna go and then sit back and wait for them to engage us again regarding, how this school is gonna operate and what it looks like in the future. So I think that we should have a discussion. We'll write the school board a letter and ask them some questions that we have from this session.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Councillor Rudy.
So I hadn't thought about bringing this up here, but it's too bad that we couldn't all attend the same day, but that just didn't materialize. So of course I felt very protective about our community, and particularly the work that we've done very diligently to not lose population, particularly at a time when we could have really hollowed out our population and actually maintained, despite what the census might show. And this actually kind of ties into something else I was going to bring up for Minburn Foundation. We've talked a lot about being able to quantify and using the data points to be able to demonstrate what actually is happening in town. So right now it's anecdotal. I go this weekend and meet a family that's from Northern Alberta that's come here, works at Initech, and is a nurse, precisely who we want. 2 students that have come to the high school, exactly what we're looking for expanding the community. And at that value scoping session, I sat with a young family that has 3 kids and has had almost an impossible time trying to find a decent rental. And when we were talking about that as council and administration just recently too, that the opportunity to be able to rent something as a renter is very limited in this community, never mind when we're looking at appropriate rental market range for seniors housing. So Minburn Foundation has been looking at how to be able to quantify that and be able to take a look at what we actually have here and what we need. So the question that I'd asked, and I asked quite a few times, and it was very specific about how I wanted to preserve what our vision is as council and what we're looking for to be able to attract families to the community. And this sort of ties into building out Prosperity Park, is we need to be able to have places for students to attend, and we need to have places for people to be able to work, and people to live as well. We can't do that if we don't have all those pieces in place. And in addition to that, being able to have a place for their children to be taken care of. Is that solely the responsibility of council? No. But we do need to be able to have that fulsome picture when we're selling ourselves to other people. And one of the questions that was asked back to me when they were doing those data points is, how much absorption is there in any of our new builds? And I said 100%, because we don't have like a Sherwood Park or Fort Saskatchewan where a developer goes and builds 100 houses and 10 of them sell. So it's a 10% absorption. We are the inverse. It's only built by somebody who wants to inhabit, which is in its own place a different problem, which means that we don't have that churn of people moving through their housing opportunities. Like, you know, if I decided I wanted to build a bigger house, somebody moves into my house, so that you potentially move up and down the chain in terms of types of housing. So all that to say is, I don't disagree with you, and I think that there definitely needs to be an ongoing conversation, because our manager from the Minburn Foundation went to a housing conversation this week. And again, being able to carve out an important conversation there, because Vegreville has the oldest lodge in the province. We also have some of the oldest facilities in terms of the hospital and the schools. So in order for us to do that good investment the right way, how does that school of the future look? Does it house other things in it? Does the lodge have other things in it, as well as seniors housing of a range of options? So I guess what I'm saying, what I'm hearing from different pieces, and tying it back to what you said, Councillor Warwa, is that we do need to have these conversations, and we might need a little bit of help here, because certainly not within my skill set. I certainly don't know how to do a housing inventory or be able to project into the future, but I do think that's something that we need to do to be able to finish that picture as we start to fill up Prosperity Park and move down that black dirt and be able to see what's going to be built there, because it's important. We want to be able to have this continue to be a place that people choose to live, and whether you're a retiree or a young family, this is a great place to live, and it's our job to be able to sell that picture to people. So I don't disagree.
So we'll meet.
Yep, let's do it.
We'll meet.
Okay, so when it comes to this, so the three of you have a conversation, questions that you need to get answered, or what you feel is an answer for our community. Get them to Sandra. Sandra will pen a letter. She'll send it out to us before it goes off to the school board. And let's be direct as we possibly can about, you know, what the possible outcomes of this are and what the questions that you were left with. I would like to have been there, but again, I was on holiday, so sorry.
You're allowed.
But yeah, but we need to reach out and make sure that they know that this is important to us, and we do have some questions about moving forward, so. You got some more?
I just had one more thing to bring forward, just to let everybody know. The library board is, our previous manager had moved on to other employment, so we've been actively recruiting, and the Northern Lights Library System has been backfilling and assisting at the library, which has been an incredible support. So again, just speaking to the whole idea of working regionally, incredibly important and helpful for our staff. And some of the board members that are going to be retiring soon have done a very comprehensive inventory of wages and staffing levels, and taking a look at that so we can plan really well for the future. So some great skill sets on the board. And I would expect that we'll have a decision and bring forward some of those suggestions soon when somebody new that we'll want to be introducing to our town council and administration, that there will be some changes there. And we're right back up to pre-COVID levels in terms of checkouts and interaction at the library. In fact, they're probably higher than they were before. So people are utilizing that space in spades.
Okay, thank you. So myself personally, like I said, I was away for a couple of weeks, visiting the Maritimes before the hurricane. But I do want to thank the three members of council that have been given their heart and soul the last few years and this year as well to the corn maze. And so Councillor Berry and Councillor Bullock and Councillor Lemko, you guys, and I know you're working with town staff and with every nonprofit in town to get people out there to help you and stuff right now. And I hear it's a struggle. And I just want to say good on you guys for the work that you're doing out there. And hopefully, it would be nice if somebody would come along and take on this project. But that being said, let's move on to director's highlights, and we're going to start with Director Saskew.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, I'll keep this brief today. So Budget 2023 is underway. We are diligently working to prepare a budget to be presented at our November 2nd meeting. There is also the annual review of the ATCO franchise fees are going to be coming down in the next couple meetings. So I've gotten information from the electric side of things. I'm just waiting for gas, and then that'll be presented to council at probably the next ledge meeting. So that's all I've got right now.
Okay, and Director Saskew, and we're gonna see some averages from other municipalities with that report?
Yes, yeah, I'm looking at, and just even projected amounts from ongoing future rates.
Okay, thank you. Director Lefebvre.
Thank you, Your Worship. First off, we've been notified recently that the Alberta Environment and Parks will be conducting a Vegreville flood study in our community. The last one was done in 1994, so it's time. They're also going to expand the area of the study, so it'll go just past Highway 631 to the north, and it will also go west and pick up more of what North Parkway drainage picks up from the rural areas. So we'll be hooking up with them next week to go through our storm system and what we have involved, and then we'll work together on a new plan for Vegreville. Also with that, we'll move to Prosperity Industrial Park in general. So the traffic impact assessment that we're working on with Polaris Engineering was submitted to Transportation September 7th. And it included the new second revision. It included the second entrance, so that we're having them approve what's actually going to be out there because of the design change. And we also, we submitted it with the entire park, not with a piece missing here for someone else to do or someone else to. We just wrapped the whole thing up. It'll be done. And the traffic impact assessment will cover the entire package. They're busy. The theme through this is we're short-staffed on everything that I'm going to talk about and having difficult with procurement of materials and things. Anyways, they're short. They've just picked it up, in fact, today. So they're saying that within a week or week and a half, they'll have their review completed, and then we can be on our way with that. We know that what they were asking for requirements, we've met in the assessment, so we're not seeing any big issues. So that's good news. That's a big step to get on the road. Prosperity Industrial Park, just an update on the park itself. The deep services are probably two and a half weeks away. That's the water and sewer lines we're putting in, and then to connect all the hydrants and service connections after that. They are struggling with staff and equipment repairs and obtaining the parts that they need for some of their equipment. They'd gone as far as saying that they had purchased a shop next to theirs in Edmonton for a mechanics bay and have had that set up for some time and have not been able to secure heavy-duty mechanics. They can't find them. So it's a real thing. Probably by the end of October, we'll have the roads at Prosperity Industrial Park completed with a gravel finish. I will do the improvements and maintenance to the scenic lands. Now we're going to wait till a couple of good frosts come through, tighten her up a little bit before we get in there, so we can do a nice job. The change order for revision 2, we're waiting for it to be forwarded to the town for review and then for approval. The hard surfacing of the roads is scheduled for late October. That's going to be a squeeze because once we hit October, we don't typically lay asphalt down into November. So what will happen is we'll likely wait until next year. We'll come back and touch up the roads and the surfaces and then lay it down when the temperature is right. Your asphalt, once you get into, it doesn't like anything less than lows of +7. And we're in November, we know we're gonna go below that, and then there's the warranty issues, and it's not worth it, so we'll see how we're doing. The culverts for all the approaches, approximately 30 are in, and they'll probably start installing next week and likely finish the installation of those next week. So the idea is when we button this up for the fall, when the snow melts and things flow in the spring, we're not flooding, we're not impacting, we're not getting wet, all the drainage is gonna work. So that's what we're focusing on now, is that and the storage retention pond as well. So things are moving along there. We had a meeting with ATCO Gas regarding feeding Prosperity Industrial Park with natural gas. As we've mentioned briefly before, the gas supply will be coming from the station that is located by the water reservoir, which is located by the arena and the pool. And it's a high-pressure line that feeds that, and then from that out to the rest of the town is an M1 classification of gas line, which is the lowest pressure that can be fed, that they provide. To feed Prosperity Industrial Park is a substantial increase in infrastructure for ATCO Gas. Other points are, because of our franchise agreement, this substantial investment will be at no cost to the town due to what's in our franchise agreement, so of course always good news. We did talk with ATCO Gas about not just the ability to feed the park, which we are still estimating quantities of use. We're taking it off standard industrial areas in the region and using that as a volume, because what else can you do? And but also the future to expand and move, as we know that there's a possibility for a larger industrial park in the future down the road, so that it is done once. So that's why they're going with a 3-inch intermediate pressure line. That's several layers up from the low pressure that we have in town. So the feed would be capable of feeding that amount. And right now, the design has been worked on for some time. So right now, we're looking at about 1.6 kilometers to be run with a 3-inch line. And what they're gonna have to do is spend the winter, basically, if they have to get right-of-ways or easements on private lands or in our lands, then they have to register those. There has to be a process of accepting them. We know they're gonna be crossing CN's rail. We know they're gonna be crossing Alberta Transportation's Highway 16A. Those are other approvals that have to come. They've said historically in the last while, things have slowed down, and we know that. That's land titles, that's everything. So transportation, they said, have been quite good to deal with. The hang-up they have is with CN in their last project. It was 8 months for an approval to cross, and that's just a real thing. So that gives us the winter to get this wrapped up. Because we haven't got a build or a foundation going in right now, that's okay. Let's get a good design and get the right size of line out there, designed well, so for future we're not having any problems. And ATCO Gas, we had a conversation about staff and purchasing and design, and they are also struggling with that, as is Excalibur, as is Inline, as is seems everybody. It's just a theme, really is. They were running, I think it was 4 rock trucks the last few days because they're just not able to purchase the parts that they need. So, but they're still clay hauling, and the dust is flying, and the weather's holding out. Oh, how about this for a good note? The product coming out of our new borrow pit has been deemed as excellent. It is superior product. It's pounding down perfect. It's really good material. And as we keep moving this water and sewer line, the depths are getting shallower and shallower, so they're moving faster and faster with the install. So it's taken, seems like a long time to get to where we are because of the depth, but now that we're getting to the shallow end, things are speeding up. So we're still not doing bad considering the hurdles that we have, that the contractors have, that the town has, that everybody has on.
Okay, so let's make sure that ATCO Gas knows how important this is to have this design and installed by spring.
Yep, and the electrical is also was designed once, and then we put it on hold until the redesign was approved. Now we've sent it back so they could start the second redesign. And as you, I don't know if I mentioned before, I'm sure I did, but it is it's a 4 partnership, 1 single trench in the ground, so there'd be no overhead once you're in the park. So you're gonna put you put 2 comms in. Typically here it's Shaw and Telus, and then 1 power and 1 gas. And there's vertical and horizontal separations of how far, but it's 1 large trench and Booker and go. So the only thing standing out of the ground should be the LED lights. and pedestals.
And will we be getting a rebate from ATCO on these lights?
If it's before September of 2023, yes.
Better be, yeah.
We can do that.
Okay,
Is there any questions?
Okay, thank you. CAO Leggett.
Thank you, Your Worship. Fairly short and sweet for me too, so I just want to start off with the action item list. Not too much to say there, other than to say I'm definitely happy with the way this is working. And just for some historical context, we started this around early mid-February this year, and to date we've tracked 67 items. And all but about a half a dozen of those are marked off as complete here. So I'm certainly happy with the way that's looking, that's going. We're sitting at about a 90% completion rate here now, give or take, and I fully expect, north of 90 for year end. So that's really, really good. As far as the individual items are concerned, happy to entertain any questions on those if you guys have them.
Anybody?
Good.
Whoa.
Awesome. And then just on the staffing front, two quick updates for you guys. Just to report that we were able to onboard our new peace officer here right now. I shouldn't say peace officer. She's still going through the licensing and paperwork process to be designated as a peace officer, but she took the oath of office today. She's been on job here for about a week, working out quite well. Folks are happy with her. Seems to be doing a great job. I think she'll be a good fit. And then also happy to report that our HR officer position has been filled and that person will be coming on board here Tuesday next week. That's it for me.
Okay, well, we're looking forward to meeting the new staff, so when we get a chance, we'll have to start introducing ourselves to a few more people in this organization, but I'm glad you found some stuff. And the new peace officer, she was a former City of Edmonton police as well?
Yeah, correct, Your Worship. Great resume, good experience, great training, in police services. So yeah, she was an officer for the City of Edmonton for a little while there, so.
Quite a resume. Our communications department sent us out welcoming and got to read quite a bit about her. So we're looking forward to meeting her.
Yep, you bet. We tried to bring her in during the workshop there too, but schedules got conflicted. So I'll try and get her in to shake everybody's hand here sooner rather than later.
Well, let's not drag her in if she's out working.
There you go.
We'll see you at the Christmas party.
Yep.
Any other questions for the CEO? Okay. Is there any other business of council? Looking around, I don't see any. So I will adjourn this meeting at 4:34.